You're listening to the Marginally Geeky Show, the epically geeky book club.
Greetings and welcome to the Marginally Geeky Show, the epically geeky book club. I'm your host for the evening, Eugene Stevens. Tonight I'm joined by Kelly Bolden and Jennifer Hetzel. How y'all doing, ladies?
Doing pretty good. It's a long weekend, you know?
Yes, yeah. At least here's in the States. So, y'all doing anything particular for the holiday?
Lots of housework, because that's exciting. And maybe going to a concert tomorrow night.
Ooh, okay. What about you, Bolden?
Going to see maybe a few fireworks tomorrow, but other than that, just relaxing.
Good deal. Yeah, I'm actually taking a trip with the family tomorrow. We're heading to the Frio River, so that should be fun. This is the second year in a row we've done that. Taking all the kids and everything else. My dad, set up a place down there so we can go down there, and it was a lot of fun last year, so we're doing it again. So, play some board games and
nice.
Hopefully do a little rafting on the river, and it'll be fun. So, tonight's book that was really lighthearted compared to tonight's topic. Last month's book was a post-apocalyptic tale, 1984. Very down, very gloomy, so on and so forth. So we followed it up with another one. This month's book was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, a Canadian author, which oddly enough, we don't have either of the Canadians on tonight's episode to talk about it.
No. What a bummer.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that tonight. It was, oddly enough, written in 1985, the year after, our previous book supposedly wrapped up, which I kind of thought was interesting. But there is a Hulu TV show, from what we understand. We were talking a little bit before the episode, that it seems to be they've changed up the story quite a bit. So if you've been watching that and you haven't read the book, you might want to go back and read the book, or vice versa. You might, if you enjoy the story, or maybe if you didn't enjoy the story and wanted a better version, I don't know. You might want to check that out. But we are going to be talking about the book version, as it were, from Margaret Atwood. I guess let's just go ahead and jump into it. I really wanted to kind of focus more so on a lot of the ideas presented in this book than the specific story, but we'll definitely cover that as well. The book is about the main character. Her name is Offred, which is funny. I thought originally when I saw it, I thought it was just Offred, and I thought, okay, it's kind of it's an interesting name, whatever. But they talk about it in the book where it's not even their real names. Let me back up some. So in this post-apocalyptic world, and it takes a while for them to explain kind of how all of this stuff went down. But we're introduced to the main character, and I'm kind of all over the place here. She is she's a handmaid, and what that means is in this world, most of the people have become sterile. Now, it sounds like that was from chemical agents and nuclear testing. That's kind of what I got from it. Is that what y'all got as well? It didn't seem like it was just like because it didn't seem like it was a global event either. It seemed like it was like mainly just the U.S.
Well, that, and they said chemicals that were in the foods and just not eating, I guess they were going to the extreme with what they thought would happen if we kept eating foods that were modified and being exposed to chemicals, pesticides, all that.
Yeah, because at one point there are some girls from, I think they said Japan, that are dressed normally and, you know, are tourists, and they're just, you know, they act and look like we do today. But Offred is a handmaiden, and she is one of the few women in who's, you know, still able to feasibly reproduce. So through a, to me, it seemed like a very quick set of events. All of the women who are still able to reproduce have become handmaids. They've lost all of their rights, and essentially what happens is they are part of a community, a very small community. There's not a lord, a captain, a commander. I'm sorry. There's a commander of, I guess, a small region of what used to be the United States, and whenever his wife is not able to have children, and so what's happened is once a month, I think it was once a month when she is most fertile, they have this really weird sex act, very sterile. We'll get into that in a minute. Where she's a she's breeding stock is what it boils down to. She is taken care of. She's given, in fact, almost to the point it's scary. Like, she's expected to eat so many meals and take so many vitamins and try, you know, absolutely no smoking, absolutely no drinking, you know, trying to take care of her body and to the absolute best they possibly can, so that hopefully, you know, she will get pregnant and have a child. Of course, as soon as she does, the child will be taken from her, given to the commander's wife. And at that point, she's kind of set. According to at least their opinion, she's set. She will be, she'll at least live out the rest of her life in somewhat comfort. If she is not able to produce after a certain amount of time, she's then shipped off to another community where another commander will continue on this trend. And after a certain time, if it's become obvious that she is not able to reproduce, then she's basically shipped off to, I don't remember the term they used for them, but
The colonies.
the colonies, yes. And basically it's workforce. And you're pretty much, you know, it's a slave community, and you're pretty much worked to death. So it's in these women's best interest to get pregnant. The only other thing is being able to bear this idea and what's going on is suicide. And they have taken extreme measures to make sure that doesn't happen as well. So these women are in a position where the only thing they can do really is live. It's not like they're living a hard life, but it's just not, they have no rights. They're not allowed to read. They're not allowed to do really anything. Just very, very, very focused, very, you know, I guess mono is the term I would think of. Like, it's existing. It's not a life by any means. So,
Yeah.
I guess I'm just going to run through the rest of the story. So we pick up, and she's talking about some of these different things. There are, they go for strolls. Her and one of the other handmaids go for these strolls from one of the other local communities, and they're going through this neighborhood, and there are these hooks that they stop and they look at, and that's where they take everyone who is been outed for one reason or another, whether it be they've broken rules, they've stolen, they're murderers, adulterers. Pretty much everything is almost an immediate death sentence, and for the most part, you're hung, and then your body is left up on these hooks to be a warning to everyone else. She talks about that. She talks about the sex act itself is just really weird. And feel free to jump in anytime here. It's literally, she's on the bed, and the wife is like behind her, like holding her, and the guy is, doing his thing. But there's no sound, there's no emotion, they're not looking into each other's eyes. There's absolutely, all romance is stripped out of it. There's no passion, there's nothing. It is literally just breeding.
I mean, don't most guys want a threesome? Isn't that every guy's dream?
Not that way.
Not quite.
Yeah, that's you know, you kind of want all of the participants to participate, as it were. But yeah, it's just okay. So let's talk about that for a second. When I read that scene, the first thing I thought of was okay. Well, they've stripped out all romance and love and passion out of this. So this is not for pleasure by any means. This is to get pregnant, to reproduce children. So I was like, why aren't they? There are definitely better ways of doing this. Fertilization clinics would be, you'd have a much higher turnout for this. And then,
but they don't want medicine and science involved,
and then that's
because it's not,
And then that's where that's where it comes in. And I was like, oh, okay, so we've basically gone back to this. There are cars, but every type of technology has almost been ripped out. Like, I don't remember. Did they say they had television? I can't not remember if they had television.
They do, because they're watching
news.
That's right, just the news. Yeah. But yeah, it's just. I mean, there's no technology. You're right, and because that was one of the questions that finally got answered for me. I was like, okay, well, why would they do it this way? Why wouldn't they do it the other way? And it was like, oh, okay, so we've turned our back on technology. We've figured we've gone way too far on one end, so we're swinging the pendulum, swinging way back the other way, and now, instead of I guess depending too heavily on technology, now we're pretty much turning our back on it.
Well, and they even say, like, when she goes to see the doctor, or when she goes to see the one lady have her baby, there's doctors there, but they're not allowed to even come in, or, they're basically like, only if you're needed, but we hope we don't need you, and they're kind of useless at this point.
Exactly, yeah. And so she, there's only the one time that this happens. And I think it's hinted that time has passed, and it's happened several times, and she's not getting pregnant. And the thought is the commander is not, he's not able to, he's sterile as well. But that's also not a thing, apparently. Like, it's not. There's a point where she talks to the wife, and the wife is like, as well as I do, men are not sterile. They are, but we don't. That can't be. It's become that type of, a society that's just like it's the woman's fault. It's never the guy's fault. So we have
Which is interesting, because the wife is the one that pushes her to, seek other means or whatever.
Right, and there's a point she does go to the doctor, and the doctor even takes her aside and says, "Look, I understand the position you're in, and, we could do this really quick. I can try to get you pregnant. That way you can go on and, move on and have a happy life. I can basically try to help save you by trying to get you pregnant, because if you don't get pregnant...
Getting my rocks off.
Yeah, exactly. It's, to me, and see, I didn't know how to take that. I didn't know... The part of me that's like... Maybe this guy is just really trying to be good, because it sounds like he was putting his neck out there. Like, he was really putting his neck out there. So part of me is like, well, maybe he was honestly trying to do this for the good of things. And then there's the other part of me that, like you kind of said, is just like, well, he's just trying to do his thing. But he offers to try to get her pregnant so that if she does become pregnant, she can, move on, have this somewhat happier life instead of possibly getting shipped off to one of these death camps almost. She turns him down. Later in the book, when it becomes obvious that that's not going to happen, the wife basically tells her, look, I've set it up. There's the attractive, I guess he's a butler, not quite a butler. He's
chauffeur.
He's the chauffeur, but apparently he also does other stuff. And she's like, look, I want you to go meet with him and get this done. Like, this has to be done. Just get it done. So, she meets with him, and she starts to fall in love with him, but that's a little bit later on in the book. At some point in the book as well, the commander secretly starts inviting her into his room, and she's expecting, okay, well, this is where things are really going to happen. This is where he's going to be like, throwing his weight around, and this is where she's going to become a sex slave, and it's absolutely nothing like that. Like, they sit around and they played Scrabble, which I hate Scrabble, but whatever. But it's that in itself is dangerous because she's not supposed to be able to read. She can read, but she's not supposed to be reading. He gives her magazines from back before, way back when. And she looks through them, and they talk about books, and she's not quite sure how to take him. Like, she's not sure if he's trying for something romantic or if he's just like bored.
Lonely.
Yeah. What were y'all's thoughts on that?
I kind of thought he was bored and just, well, maybe a little bit of a deviant, because he took her to that club and stuff. And I think he liked pushing the envelope, but I also think he was legitimately like, okay, some of this is stupid and I really just miss playing Scrabble or whatever,
See, I don't have any empathy for the commander at all.
I didn't either.
I don't. I think I feel that perhaps they can draw parallels with modern day society. He's like a modern politician. He's dirty. He's not necessarily got good intentions. I mean, he takes her to this risky party, and what better way to manipulate someone who's not allowed to read than to play a game of Scrabble where you've got to come up with these, amazing words to win points. So I don't have any empathy for him at all, and I think that he has to exist because of all the juxtaposition that you have within the novel itself. He has to exist so that she can find Nick to be attractive and compassionate and, the ideal relationship. So as far as anything that, I just think he has to be there for that reason, so...
Yeah, I didn't have any empathy for the guy by any means, but yeah, and then, at first, like you said, it's interesting that we start off with it's just playing Scrabble, and it's just, except for the kiss at the end of the night, the forced kiss. Right. But other than that, it does seem like he's just lonely, and like you said, there's part of him that is showing that, yeah, a lot of the shit that's going on is stupid. He's not raising a finger trying to change any of it by any means. And then there is the scene where he takes her to this, basically a sex club that is completely out of bounds. Everything that should be happening. Once again, if they were found out, it would probably be, she would definitely be killed. He would probably be reprimanded at the most. But yeah, there's this scene where he's like showing her off and talks about the fact that there are other people in the community who are doing the same thing. They are pretty much doing the exact same thing for the exact same reasons. Yeah, it just I'm sorry, I had a lot of interesting thoughts about this book. But anyway, so in the book, so she does finally she talks to some of the other handmaidens, and there's some, she feels like close calls. There is a group that is hunting down people who are deviants for whatever reason, and it's very swift. There's no real trial or anything. Like if you come across their sites and they believe that you've done whatever it is, the crime that they think you've done, you're guilty and you're hung, and you're then you're set out on the meat hooks. So it's very it's scary. It's a very scary situation. Whenever the people would see the black vehicle pulling up, they knew that it was their time was over. In the book, she does end up talking with some of the other handmaidens and finds about an underground group that is trying to smuggle people or trying to get people out, if nothing else, to at least a little bit more freedom, preferably trying to get them over the Canadian border. And of course, this is once again a punishment, death if you're found doing this. And there were several people in the book that were, they found guilty, they were hung, and they actually watched it. And they talk about the fact that everyone watches these hangings energetically, very much like we're told the hangings were like back in the Middle Ages. Like this was their source of entertainment. People were energized for going to watch these hangings, which is just whatever. But
awful.
Yeah. But so they she ends up getting with Nick, and she ends up finding one of her older friends. Okay, that's something else I forgot to talk about. I listen, as with all the books that we do on this book club, I listened to the book, and I don't know, did anyone read it, or did everyone? Bully,
I read it.
Okay. Was the text at all changed at all? Like, was it italicized? Was there anything that gave you a clear indication that she was she was moving from talking from present tense to past tense? Like, because she would be talking about what was going on right now in front of her, and then literally the next line I heard was her talking to her friend from back before.
The only thing, after a while, I caught on because when she was in present tense, I think there were no what's the word around, like when somebody talks. God, I can't think of the name. So there was no punctuation, and I thought that was really strange. But then there would be parts of the book where there was, quotation marks to indicate that somebody's speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I figured out finally, okay, when she's in the future or the past, I think she's using quotation marks, and when she's not, she isn't. But then I figured it might be because of what we find out at the end as well. So,
well, but there are breaks in the text though that show that there's a transition happening. So, like when she's self-reflective versus when she's describing something in the past versus what she's the present, then there are breaks in the text.
Oh, was there? Okay. Because, like I said, listening to the audiobook version, like all of a sudden she's talking about, and her friend was Mora. All of a sudden she'd just talk about her, and I'm just like, where the hell did she come from? And I'm like, oh, okay, we're having not a flashback, but a memory or whatever. So, and then once she finally, she does end up meeting her in the club, Jezebel's. Looking through the notes here. One of the other flashbacks she has is and this is what kind of helps explain the backstory, is her training, the training that she went into to become a handmaiden. I guess before we get to the end, let's start breaking down how all of this happened. So, in the book, at least to me, it took a long time for it to finally explain how this version of the world came about. And I want to do some comparing and contrasting to 1984. In 1984, I felt like at the very beginning, I got an understanding of what kind of a world it was that we were living in, and how it came about. Like, it was very, very straightforward. This one took a while for it to get there, which was kind of nice in that it gave me a reason to keep going. I was like, okay, well, maybe, hopefully we'll find out why and how we got to this position here pretty quick. But after a while, it took to me too long, and I started getting frustrated. I was like, how did we end up in at least what I thought was the United States? It's now called Gilead. How did we get from our civilization to that civilization? And then it was about that time, like I said, I started getting frustrated that they started talking about it. And it was all because of low reproductive rates, which we've already discussed a little bit about, primarily from chemicals and testing and food and everything else. But to me, it was still a bit of a quick jump. Go on.
It's also it was also religious fanaticism. I mean, they went extreme, and there were like wars and everything as well. But I think that was the main push. Is the religious stuff too.
Yeah, and it was very quick. It was literally, it says that the president was assassinated, and Congress takes over, immediately steps up, says, we're taking over powers. We'll, of course, we'll give back powers, whenever things settle down. And then, of course, things never settle down. But yeah, it was this this huge swing from everything that we know today to this. I mean, literally stepping back, like we talked about before. We turned our back on technology. One of the first things it talks about, she was married, she had a daughter, and just within, it seemed like a few weeks, maybe not even that long, like all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, now women can't, use money, and women can't hold property, and women can't vote, and women can't do this. And just all of women's rights just evaporated in what seemed like a course of like a few days. I don't know, maybe I was getting a wrong read on that, but it just seemed like it was extremely fast. Her husband and her try to get across the border. Oh, that was the other thing, was because her husband had a divorce previously, they declared their marriage null and void. So they knew that they were going to, basically, take her into this Handmaid program. So they were trying to get to the border, were not able to get to the border, and then, she ends up in the program anyway. So by the end of the book, she ends up meeting with Nick. He ends up, he's part of the group as well, and he ends up helping to arrange her somewhat escape, her seeming escape. The group shows, the black car shows up. They basically say, they talk to the commander and his wife, give them a dressing down, and take her into custody. And it's at that point she understands that she's safe. She's not quite sure. She's hopefully thinking that she's about to escape, but she doesn't know 100% until, a few minutes later, when they basically give her the kind of the wink and the nod. Hey, it's not what it seems. We're here to actually kind of help you. And then for the main purposes of the plot of the book, it's done. That's the end of the book. It picks up afterwards discussing, I'm not sure if it's a college professor. I don't know if it's just a guy on a speaking circuit, but he's discussing this, and okay, I don't know what that was. This has all been, the entire story has been a book, I guess just a journal of notes.
Recording.
Yeah. That they found in this fallen country that used to be called Gilead, which was once the United States of America. And, there wasn't a lot known about it. They're still trying to figure it out, how it came about, what happened and everything. And they find this documentation. They're not 100% sure if it's positive. They've done research. They can't find anything about her name. They think they know what the commander's real name is. They're not sure. They're hoping maybe she got to either Canada or escaped to England. But yeah, and then that's how the book wraps up, is that, this was all a historical document that they're going through. So, on the actual, the epilogue is, I'm looking down here at these notes. The epilogue was actually in 2195. So it's, about 200 years later from when the book was written, feasibly. So yeah, some time has passed. Thoughts on the main plot? Like I said, I don't think the main plot is the focus of this story. It's more so the ideas that it tries to present. Bolden?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think it is. That's what makes it iconic, is that these ideas are presented, and you've got to think too about the context of when the novel was actually written itself in 1985. You're coming off the cusp of the feminist movement in the 60s and 70s. You're getting ready to, the whole idea of a female. I don't want to say entitlement. That's not what I mean, but that they can do things is pretty prevalent. And to have this written in that right at that time, kind of, underscores, again, the antithesis of it, and underscores the idea that at any time it can change. And and so it kind of fuels a fervor there for, female rights. So that's an important theme. And, the whole idea that, again, if we do have to go back into something as a conservative society like that, would we be able to stay sane?
Right.
And, I think one of the greatest quotes from this book is something along the lines where she says, it's early on, I'm not going to do it verbatim, but she says something like, well, I have to ration my thoughts. And, you see that throughout the book when she does become, self-reflective and sometimes very frustrated. The whole idea that would we be able to manage under those circumstances?
Right.
I mean, there's tons of themes, but those are prevalent. I do think that, again, they draw this connection to modern society and the idea that there is chaos, when the world is changing and you get the idea, you understand what's happening. And like you were saying, that she's stripped of everything and people are marked. We're doing that in our society. We do it. And the leaders are not exactly wholesome people. And so, yeah, I think that, again, that's another theme too, but I mean, those are just my thoughts, but, there's the whole fertility theme is amazing to me. So
yeah, to me that, like I said, that just seemed like it came on awful quick. Like, I mean, we track, population constantly throughout the country and other countries and, throughout the world. And I mean, there are areas where, the population is getting smaller. Reproduction is not as high. We're not producing as many people, especially in some countries. And there are some countries that are really starting to have problems with that. And I don't know, maybe it's just the lack of the backstory on it. But to me, it just seemed like it was awful quick. Like it was just all of a sudden like, oh, damn, I just realized like no new kids have been born in the last 10 years. I'm sure it probably wasn't meant that way. Unfortunately, it just kind of came across that way to me. But, well,
but the whole idea too of like, this is again, a bit of a tangent, but the idea that, okay, her first husband, or her husband, whatever, he's marked because he was divorced.
Mm-hmm.
But she can have, the idea of having a previous, she can have a child beforehand. She's just a vessel.
Exactly. Yes. That's, good term. That's what they used. Yeah.
But he can, we can't use his body anymore just because he's been divorced,
Yeah, because she's constantly worried, thinking, well, is he dead? He's probably dead. In fact, she pretty much tells herself he is dead just so that she can stay sane. But then that thought keeps getting back into her mind. Well, what if he isn't? What if he's still alive somewhere? What is he doing? Where is he?
And you kind of have that hope that maybe he'll pop up somewhere.
Right.
That he's in the black van one time, or he is one of the doctors that is outside, a standby. You kind of keep thinking, oh, she's just going to, and then you fear that he's going to be one of them on the wall, and hanging there. So, again, he's a literary element that has to be in there, but, and it keeps you guessing and keeps you engaged.
Jen, thoughts on main plot or particular?
So many thoughts. Well, I mean, it's pretty terrifying, right? To think that, even in the 80s, we were pretty technologically advanced compared to 100 years before that. And how, like you said, how fast they regressed, and just rejected technology and modern thinking and forced people into, all of these classes that, didn't exist a few years before. so that's a scary thought, especially like you said, considering it's sort of happening to a lesser extent today, and it could, foreseeably get to that point. Hopefully it won't, but it's not hard to imagine it when you read a book like this. And my other thought is, this is the reason we need separation of church and state, because things can get a little taken to the extreme like that, a little out of control, and it's just scary to imagine. With any religion, it should never be forced upon people,
right?
In that way. But yeah, I mean, the fact that women were just used for their bodies, and if they couldn't have kids, they were made to endure essentially like a second wife that was there just to screw their husbands.
Yeah.
It's kind of unbelievable. And the wife herself, I mean, hated it. She was crying the whole time, and yet she had fought for it. So yeah, it's just ironic, that way.
And I think that came through. I think at first I wasn't sure, like, I don't know. It took a while for me to finally kind of get that, where it was like, okay, I think she's fine. She does realize that, oh, hey, I kind of helped bring this about, and now it sucks. So I screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
This isn't what I wanted. But,
yeah. Go on.
That's pretty much it. I mean, just it's really fucked up, and I'm interested to see the show. I mean, because obviously seeing it is a whole other level of experience. But
yeah,
we'll see how they hold to the story.
Well, going back to, like I was saying, I kind of want to compare and contrast this to 1984. There were several things in 1984 that allowed the government to basically have control over the populace that were echoed here as well. And it's those things that I'm like, a lot of people feel the same way. And it's, I guess, it's kind of one of those telltale things. I'm like, well, we probably should really be looking out for that. One such thing is, of course, war, constant war. There's talk. They don't really go into the war aspect of it, but there is a constant talk of there being a war, even though there's not really a lot of evidence of it being there. Just like in 1984, they said that there were skirmishes on the border, but for the most part, they're like nothing ever happens. The lines never move. No one ever wins. It's just a constant state of war to keep people, pretty much scared at all times. The regression on technology is another huge one. We kind of talked about that earlier. They talk about the fact that there's very little technology. Like you said, they've really gone back on the idea of using chemicals for whatever reason, and I wasn't sure if that was Atwood's viewpoint. I don't know if she just used that as I don't know if she was using that as her statement of her thoughts and opinion, or if she was just using that as a device to kind of carry it along. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I didn't take it as loudly saying, "Oh, hey, we need to give up all these chemicals." And stuff. I didn't take it that way. I just took it as, hey, this is what's happened. It helped contribute because it was, one of the catalyst. And then the rise of this fanatical religious group, and I'm not going to name any particular religion because it's definitely not. It wasn't any particular sect, and they didn't really go into which and if anyone it was just a very, very radical conservative theology that ended up taking over. So let's talk about, and this is kind of the real question. Lainey did not join us for this episode. She. We talked a little bit about this before the show. She said, it's kind of too real. And I'm like, well, not really. But I did ask myself multiple times while listening / reading this book, do you think this could happen? In 2000, now we're not talking 1985, we're, mindset. We're talking 2017. could something like this happen? Does anyone want to go first, or do you want me to just jump in?
Well,
I do think there is a section of the population that would like to see it happen, and in a way is even, working to limit women's rights in a lot of ways. We see a lot of the things that were gained in the 60s and 70s, like you were talking about, being challenged now and being even overturned in some cases. And it's kind of scary to see that and know that we're still fighting over this stuff 50 years later. And why is this still a thing? Like, shouldn't we be moving forward instead of taking people's rights away? So in that aspect, yeah, I do think it could happen. And it's one of those things, like you said, it could just sneak up on us the way it did in the book. And, one day we go to work and we can't use money and we don't have a job, and little by little we can't do things. It's really scary to think about.
Bolden?
Well, I think there's the potential that it could happen.
Okay.
And I do think that it would be, it would have to be very abrupt and radical, like in the book, just all, like Jennifer was saying too, just very all of a sudden. But you think about things that, again, that have happened that limit us as females. One of the biggest things in the campaign was the abortion laws. And then you think about how in Europe, women take long maternity leaves, and we don't get that sort of thing. The wage comparability is always there too. And then I think about these hidden sects that are always out there, that can brainwash people into, turn into, fanatics. And in today's world, like I kind of mentioned before, there is this underlying fear of just everything, you go out. I mean, case in point, there was one of the headlines, this today, I think, was, the guy had road rage and shot the girl in the car next to him, for no apparent reason. And, people have that underlying fear because you never know. And so in that case, it makes people vulnerable and therefore, yes, capable of being manipulated and suckered into whatever belief may be out there. So yeah, I think it has potential. But I also am very highly optimistic in thinking that there's more of us that have the right convictions out there that would, try our best to prevent it from happening. But who's to say?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this because, like I said, I went back and forth trying to think about this. Number one, okay, so let's just take we are going to be political. If you haven't already gotten that, there's a lot of political stuff in this. So we're not going to tiptoe around. We're just going to talk about it.
I don't think you could talk about this book without.
No, and that's one of the reasons why people point to this book is because of politics. For whatever whichever way the current temperature is, conservative, liberal, people will point to this book just like they do 1984. There are certain books that we point to as omens almost of hey, listen, things are kind of swinging this way. We need to make sure we don't go off the deep end. The technology thing. Here's the thing. I mean, I'm coming at this from my viewpoint, from my ideology, from my little corner of the universe, as it were. I tend to be more liberal thinking than a lot of other people that I know, some family members even. That being said, I wouldn't consider myself a liberal. I'm definitely I try to stay middle of the road kind of most of the time. So let me just kind of get that out there. The technology thing, for example, I'm like, there's no way a lot of us would give up some of this stuff. There's just no way. And then I was like, no, we do have anti-vaxxers out there. We have these flat earth, I'm sorry, I'm just going to call them idiots. They're idiots. We have these flat earth idiots that honestly, for some reason or another, think the world may actually still be flat and that they've just been lied to. Whatever.
On that same note, did you know that there are people who do not believe in giraffes? That's a thing.
Yes. I know it's a very minor group, but still, the fact that it's just like...
But it exists. It exists. They think giraffes are robots, the ones that they see in zoos, or that they are dinosaurs that went extinct and they don't exist today. Like, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it just...
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Well, I mean, and then you have these, conspiracy. I mean, you'd almost call them, I'll group them into just the conspiracy theorist. The whole moon landing was faked. JFK, there was more to JFK than what it was. Whether or not there actually is, I'm not going to get into that. That's a different subject. But I mean, yeah, and then you have these, you got this overwhelming amount of information, and yeah, it can be read differently. I'll just throw my opinion of climate change out there. Is climate change real? Yeah, absolutely. If you don't think the climate's changing, you're an idiot. As to how much we've changed it, as to how much the planet is naturally changing it, as to how much it's actually going to change and all the effects, I'm sure it's probably somewhere out more in the middle than some of the extremists on both sides have said. I'll just leave it at that. But, there is proof that there are these sects of people out there who will believe whatever. So I'm like, okay, I guess the technology part of it, yeah, I guess that's kind of possible. But the weird sexual, like, just, sex is just for reproduction, this weird, taking all of the emotion out of it, and the same thing for childbirth, because they talked about the childbirth was supposed to be like really, focused, and like there's no machinery, and it's supposed to be all natural and all this other stuff. And I thought, man, I don't know about that. I don't know. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, Scientology. Yeah, that kind of smacks heavily of Scientology. And I thought, well, great. But
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, if you'll let me. Well, getting back to that, very stoic way of procreating. Again, it's a horrible, ceremony. I think that's what they call it, a ceremony.
You're right. That is what they refer to it as, was the ceremony.
Yeah. I mean, it is horrible for everyone involved. But again, that, Atwood leaves us with some hope, because ultimately, at the end, she's with Nick. And so the underlying and what's underscored the most is that despite all this horror, this society and how it's limited and, nothing ideal at all, humans have to have emotions, and they have to have
relationships. They have to have relationships. We're social animals, absolutely.
And love has to exist. And so therefore, that's, again, getting back to the idea that you have to have that commander be so incredibly like cardboard that, you understand the desire that she has for Nick, and just just in a simple touch. And so, again, as a species and as human beings, We have to have that. And so that's your underlying hope, despite the whole negative atmosphere, in the novel. So I just wanted to interject that real quick because I do get it that that's such a horrible feat and such a horrible thing for people to have to, procreate in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, she knows how to ration her thoughts, and she knows how to sit there and think of Nick, and how to sit there, and think of the things to get her through each and every day. So
right.
I just want to, I didn't mean to get you off topic.
No, absolutely. I'm glad you interjected. So no, anytime y'all want to shut me up because I feel like I just ramble on this show, by all means, please do. And I guess because I looked at it as a trifecta. I looked at this as, Congress taking over, seemingly assassinating the president, and taking over. We've seen some really wild things happen with some different governments, throughout the country. I don't really foresee that happening. We kind of have things like too laid out to the point. Like there'd have to be something else like really happening. Now, I think they also said there were terrorist attacks as well. It may have actually been terrorists that I may be crossing something. Anyway, that I'm like, okay, whatever. But the trifecta to me was the rise of the extreme religious fanaticism, the regression on technology, and then the just basically everyone kind of throwing their hands up and going, oh, well, women have rights. Okay. And
yeah, that was crazy to me. Everybody just accepted this new culture. Like it was, like they were with it.
Of the three. And like I said, now I am a white, heterosexual, 39, 40-year-old male who lives in Texas. But the idea of someone saying, oh, well, your wives and daughters and mothers and sisters are now just for procreation. I just don't, of the three things, that is the one to me that just seems like, we have tread so far back in some cases on reproductive rights and women's rights on different things, but to go that far, y'all know me. I'm not a violent guy by any means, but sorry, that would be the line. I'm sorry. And I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I don't see the average Southerner, particularly Texan. I can mainly speak for Texans. I can't see, I'm sure there are a few here and there, but I just don't see male Texans really going, yeah, no, you're not just doing that to our women. That's not happening. And I don't know, I may be talking out of turn on that one. I may be looking too much on the rosy side of things. Because I do generally believe people are good. And that to me just was like, that was too far. I could maybe see, and that was the other thing, was this, like I said, this seems like everything just happened so quickly, like, and she talks about it whenever she's going through the training, the older women that are prepping them for this are like, you will be you're the hardest generation because you're the ones that will still remember what it used to be like. The women to come will not know anything different, so it won't be as hard for them. And
it's like in 1984 when they take the ability to even think thoughts by changing the language, right?
Exactly, yeah.
They don't even have any way to experience it, so they couldn't know that it could be better or whatever.
And see, and once again, going back to 1984, that was a progression over time. Like he laid that out in the book that, George Orwell laid that out, that this was a long progression over time to the point that, yes, even 4 or 5 years ago was so blurry, no one really knows how long it took. But they were on multiple revisions of the encyclopedia and of the dictionary. And, these were things that just constantly went. Whereas this was just like turnkey. Like all of a sudden, oh, hey, by the way, the United States government's gone and women don't have rights and you can't use technology and this is how we have sex. And it's just like, It was a lot to swallow that
So-
quick. Maybe that's why I didn't find it as believable, but maybe that's just me.
To your point about men not accepting, I would hope that they wouldn't accept it and just turn over and whatever. But I do know that there is a sect of society that does view women that way to this day. And even if people don't have that extreme of a belief that, women are good for having babies, there is an overwhelming pressure in society for women to have kids. And it's kind of expected of a woman, like at some point you're going to get married, you're going to have kids. And when you do, you're going to stop working, or you're going to be the one, you know what I mean, to kind of take that on. And that kind of sets your whole life on hold while you're taking on that responsibility. And in that way, I think indirectly a lot of men, I'm not saying all men, but there is an overwhelming view that that's just how it should be, and that women are kind of expected to play out that role even today. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Boldy, thoughts?
Of course, I'm and I'm the oldest one.
Not by much. Shut up.
I mean, see, I don't know. I just think I don't know. I think that again, depending on your background and what things you've been exposed to, I tend to think that I think of my friends, and I see them as individual women who have made their individual choices, and that they have, well, let me see. Like, I look at Lainey,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think of, I can't see Lainey having this idea of, okay, if and when I get married, then, there is kids, then there is this. So I just see, I mean, that's just me though. Again, I see them differently.
But I mean, the expectations are still there.
There's women.
The expectations are still there. So,
women that,
for example, when Christy and I got married, we've been married for 15 years. Up until the day we got married, it was, and this is still the expectation for a lot of people, is don't have sex. You don't have sex until you're married. And then it's almost turnkey. As soon as you get married, when are the grandkids coming? When are the kids coming? And it's just like...
I mean, there's this hidden, this underscoring timeline.
Yeah,
I get that. I don't know. I don't want to call it an expectation anymore.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think the expectation is softening.
Yes, I mean, that's what I think. Especially, I have older children. And the millennial girls, don't, are like a completely different, species. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. I get the timeline, yes, and I get that that's an expectation. I just don't like calling it that.
Right.
But
I absolutely agree that not everybody falls into that category, but I just know as a 32-year-old single female, I'm constantly feeling the pressure, when are you going to get, like my only goal in life should be to get married and have kids, or I'm not, a worthwhile member of society almost is kind of how it comes across sometimes. And so in that respect, I do see a very strong representation in this novel, because it's almost like women are just still expected to have babies and nothing else matters, your own personal goals or whatever. But yeah, it's all subjective to your own experience as well.
Yeah, I just, and I've had this conversation with my wife. I hope we're not veering too far off the book here, but it's like, it's just, you think, okay, well, when my boys get old enough, they'll get married and have kids. And I'm like, that may not be how it happens though. Like, they may not get married, or they may get married and they may not have kids, or, you know, one of 1,000 other scenarios. And like I said, the older I've gotten, the more mellow I've gotten about it. I'm just like, okay, you know, trying to fall back on the whole, as long as they're healthy and happy, I'm okay.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, granted, they're 5 years old. My boys are 5 years old. Am I going to maybe want to become a grandpa? Probably, but not anytime, not anytime soon, and not an expectation. You know, like that's not something. But I don't want to, and I want to actively try not to put that on my boys. I really try not to put that on my boys. I don't want them to feel like, well, son, you know, it's time for you to go out and find a wife and, you know, have kids. And, you know, I don't want to put that on
your
them.
seed.
Yeah, I don't want them to have that pressure.
Yeah, and I don't speak to my boys like that, and I never have. And that's what I'm saying. Kind of like, you know, that whole expectation is still there. It still exists, but how you approach it and how you know, absorb it is to each his own. Because, you know, never have I sat there too, and because you can harp on something so much that they retaliate, you know, or they resent it.
Yes.
And so that's why, you know, maybe I don't like that whole idea of an expectation, because you're harping on it in saying that.
Right.
And so, you know, you've got to deal with it however you can, as yourself, and as in our case as parents. You know, it's interesting, but you know, you've read a good book when it makes you think.
Okay, so let's. I think we've kind of hammered on I think we've hammered on most of the themes, most of the ideas, and then of course the actual plot itself. So let's just go ahead and move into the wrap up stage. Did you enjoy the book? Yay or nay? You know, that whole spiel. Jennifer.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. The ending was kind of bunk, but I mean, the story itself, you know, was very interesting, captivating, and like she said, made me think and kind of scared me a little, but you know, that's to be expected with this kind of book. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Bolden, this is the second time you read it.
Oh yeah.
You enjoy it still?
I mean, oh yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it the first time I read it. And again, I was, you know, 20 years younger or more, 25. And so, again, I remember thinking to myself as a younger me that, you know, I would never, ever sit there and try to conform to something like that, you know?
Right.
And I remember thinking, you know, even the small details, thinking, oh my gosh, if I would have to wear a red garment that's thick, and the pantaloons and the layer upon layer, you know, and because I'm very, you know, defensive when it comes to things I absolutely do not like. Mm-hmm. And I could just see myself taking that white thing off my head and just, you know, mulling it into some ball, you know, or sweating to death in the whole dress. You know, and so I remember thinking, no, I will never conform to something like that. And again, you know, it added fuel to the fire. You know, I was, you know, as a female in society, I was going to do what I needed to do. But, and yeah, and even now, you know, again, as a very independent 42-year-old, it still resonates that, you know, I can do it as a female. And I wouldn't necessarily like the Procreation Act, but by golly, whatever was necessary.
The book was okay for me. I guess it definitely, I didn't even think about the fact that it did make me think a lot, because it did, you know, looking back, and of course the conversations we've had. I'm glad I read it. I will say that. I am really glad I read it, so I can definitely reference it. And like I said, I drew a lot of parallels between this and 1984. It helps the fact that we read them back to back, but the fact that there are, so many things that were the same, and it's like it helps hammer that home. Hey, listen, there are certain things that we don't need to do and allow the government to do because it kind of gives them way too much control. It's, not saying that these are, outlines on how you take over, but it's a good thought process. I'm glad I read the book. Like I said, I don't foresee myself reading it again. But in the end, and I didn't bring this up earlier, so I hate to kind of wrap this back around, but the two things that I find the hardest seeing this actually happening, if it were to somehow or another happen in nowadays society, is one, 1984, we did not have the internet. The spread of knowledge and community and vocalization was not there. It's a worldwide organization now. That greatly helps in keeping governments from overstretching. Secondly, I'm surrounded by strong-willed women, and that's another reason why I just don't. Like I said, I had a hard time kind of swallowing that pill because I'm just like, I can't see any of my female friends being okay. Like, it would literally be like they talked about in the book. Like, yeah, we got to make sure there's no way that they can either A, escape, or B, kill themselves, because I don't see any of my female friends conforming to this, like one way or the other. Like they're going out one way or the other, whether it be taking themselves out or taking out as many people as they can on the way out. So.
But you know what? I just thought of something. After you made that statement, the previous occupant of her room, who did commit suicide, in the book, a scene there that kind of resonates with me too, because you think, had she just held on a little bit longer and gotten in the black van, would that black van have been someone just like Nick in there?
Yeah, what? I didn't even think about that.
And do you think, you think she missed the opportunity because she was, she missed it, and the black van could have been her saving grace. Yeah,
that's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Way to bring it back around, Waldy. That's why we have a librarian on a reading show. Let's go ahead and move on to
That's deep, man.
Yeah. Our next book that we're reading for next month is Unstoppable by Bill Nye. So if you're reading along with this, please go ahead and pick it up. Like I said, we'll be recording the episode either the end of this month, beginning of next month. We'll see. But yeah, we're doing Unstoppable by Bill Nye. Let's move on to what we're reading. Has anyone, Bolden, I'll go ahead and ask you, because I already know the answer. What else have you been reading?
I am currently reading a very, very popular novel right now called The Hate You Give, written by a young African-American female, and it is it describes the dynamic between the African-Americans and police. And so it's a modern story written on those dynamics, and it's fantastic. It's geared toward high school, but it's received a lot of accolades because it's written so well, and so and you get the perspective of everybody involved, which is
that's good, incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one-sided. It's amazing. So I've read that, and I'm in the middle of that. I just finished a book about the Radium Girls, about the dial painters in World War One.
I've heard about this one.
Oh,
yeah, and how they painted using actual radium, and the catastrophic things that happened to them as a result.
Yeah, just destroyed their bodies.
Yes, and it's very heartbreaking, and and magical at the same time, because you really understand the power of radiation.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I've actually, knock on wood, because so far, during the summer, most of us educators tend to pour over books because we don't have the opportunities in the year to do so. So I have read some exceptionally well-written books this summer, so I'm kind of excited. Like I said, knock on wood, I hope the trend continues, because that doesn't happen very often.
You're like, awesome book. Oh, that was a dud.
Yeah. It's like, come on, I'm waiting for the disappointment to come, and it's like, ah!
Oh, man. Jennifer, have you been reading anything else?
Not really. I read the Bill Nye book, but for another book club, but that's about it. I haven't had time.
Oh, so that was your motivation for recommending it. Okay.
It was also a very good book.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, that's our next book. So, well, don't give away too much on it, because, like I said, I haven't read it yet, and it will be the book for next month. So, the only things I've really got to read, I haven't watched hardly any movies. I really haven't watched any TV shows. I've been busy just doing other stuff. But I did do what now?
Ghost Trap.
Yeah, Ghost Trap. I did read the newest issue of Ghostbusters 101, and there's been talk in the Ghostbusters community about possibly trying to definitely merge the older movies and the new movie, and to me, this issue just did it. Like, it's like, guys, there's no need to talk about it. They pretty much, wrapped it up. It was a great job. The other thing that I've started listening to, and I didn't realize he had a book out. Occasionally I've got a couple. Well, I usually have a couple of credits on my Audible account. I'll go in and look just to see if something's come out that it's flew under my radar. And one of my favorite authors, Daniel Suarez, wrote and has a new book out called Change Agent, and I'm about halfway through it, and it's a little different from the other books he's written. I think this is only his fourth book. But it's very, very technical, extremely technical, but it takes a idea from, modern society, modern technology, and like really, really kind of takes it to the nth degree. They're usually pretty violent. They're, almost kind of a detective story to some extent. The first one he wrote was actually a two-parter, Demon and Freedom TM, and that's about how a computer virus essentially really starts to take over the world, and everyone starts living in this augmented reality, which is actually really cool. The second book he wrote was I can't remember what the name of it was right offhand, but it was about how people were using automated drones to just like do some really horrific stuff. And then this one is about Change Agent, is about how most of the governments have had to really crack down in the future for genetically modifying children. There are certain edits that they deem are okay. If it helps prevent major disease, that's fine. But the main character works in a branch of the government, world government, to kind of crack down on this. So like people who are like specifically going in and are like, making children either super smart or super strong or whatever, trying to find that type of things. They want specific, beauty marks or stuff like that. But very early on in the book, he ends up getting injected with this, secretly. He gets this injection secretly and wakes up, and his entire body has changed. He now looks like the mob boss, basically, for these underground genetic modifiers. And it talks about how this should not be possible. Of course, no one believes him, but it really starts to explore the idea that if you were able to change even just part of your DNA structure, especially on a living person, not something, not a embryo that we're growing. If we were able to actively change things about ourselves, it pretty much frees up anyone from any accountability, because you could do whatever you wanted and just simply change into someone else, and there would be no way of like tracking you down.
Figuring out.
Yeah, so it's a very, I mean, like I said, it's taking this technological idea and taking it to the nth degree, but it's actually really, it's really interesting. And I like the way he writes. He's very simple in his writing, but like I said, it's very, some cases it's very dry, very technical, but I eat it with a spoon. I love it. So, well, alrighty then. If you would please, if you're listening to the show on iTunes, please give us a 5-star review. It does help out a lot. Also, you can find it on Stitcher and Google Music. Sorry about that. You can also watch the show on YouTube. We don't have a strict time as to when we record, date and time that we record. It's a little fuzzy sometimes, but I'll try to get that information out there a little early. So if you want to join us in the chat room, by all means, please do. We'd love to have you. Where can we find you on? Oh, I'm sorry. You can also find the site at epicallygeeky.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at epicallygeeky as well. Where can we find you on the internet, Boldy?
You can find me on Instagram at Library Voodoo, and you can find me on Twitter at Library Voodoo.
Jennifer, where can we find you online?
Instagram and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be.
Kind of dropped out, but Het's Gonna Be Me. And then you can follow my individual wacky adventure online at Optimus Gene on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. For everyone on the site, have a good night.